ready? All right. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Great to see everybody. And I am really thrilled to have another incredible person here today with us, Antoine Roney. And we're going to get an incredible perspective today from somebody deeply, deeply, intimately interwoven into music and culture, both here and elsewhere. And to do a slightly more proper intro, I'm going to hand it over to Mia.
I don't know if it's proper, but this is my husband. We've been knowing each other about 45 years. We met in high school. He was in the music department, and I was in the dance department at Duke Ellington School of Fine Arts in Washington, D.C. He went on to Hartford, and I went to Howard. And then we kind of moved on our own trajectories in life. And then we came back together in our 30s, and we have 2 children who are both artists. Kojo would love to come and talk with you all. I'm sure when he comes back from California, he can maybe have another conversation about jazz music and its legacy through the younger generation, because he's about y'all's age. So in the process of our relationship, we managed to also create a tool, a way to move as family, a way to learn, a way to carry legacy. So we're not necessarily just looking at it, but we're deeply, like Jerome said, deeply woven inside of the structure of creativity, of culture, humanity, and our own craft as a language form. And we pass that down very intentionally to our children, who are now pretty great artists themselves. So there's a lot of information. You probably will only get a 16th of it, maybe today, or a 32nd of it today, because he has automatic memory recall, so he can remember people and names and places. He's a map. So I'll just tell this last story. When I was pregnant with our daughter, who's now is going to be 30 in September, we went to, he was touring, who were you with?
When she was born?
Not when she was born, but when we went to Israel. We went to Paris. Oh, you were with Cindy Blackman, who's now Cindy Black drummer. Has anybody heard of Cindy Blackman? Cindy Blackman, Santana, married to Carlos Santana. But anyway, so he was on tour with Cindy, and they were in Paris for a while, and then we went to Israel. He had some really amazing people in Israel, friends, and so we went and stayed in Israel because we really wanted, we had always talked about in high school that we wanted to go to Egypt together. So this was the first opportunity, and we were like, yo, let's try to get to Egypt. So he said, yeah, we can go through the Alat Desert, and we can just get to Egypt, right? I'm like, okay, you know how to get there? I'm with you. He can get anywhere in the world. He's been all over the world, I think except for Australia, but everywhere else. So he's been all over the world. He's been all over the world. So he's a true genius in his right. He would never say that, but I can say that. And so we try to make this thing happen. We always try to have an opportunity to talk to people, but this is our first really like collective conversation with young people in the institution. So he has Anoint Productions, which is a whole kind of company that he can talk a little bit more about it. but that helps to garner young, vivacious, powerful, innovative musicians and artists in general. Hold on and distribute their recordings, so it's a whole kind of archive and or a recording structure and company that he's built, him and his son. And so he's really just a great overall guy.
It's important to have a perspective because it's more than just a music. It's a lifestyle, and the music itself is probably wasn't designed for an industry. It was a community music, and it's been around for a long time. They have came through different names, from jazz, especially, to blues. You know, all this blues today is a different blues than it was back then. Today the blues has been simplified and called it blues, but the expression's been around a long time. So this music has a lot of connection with the culture, the community music. Like any other music in any other culture, they have their community music, and jazz stuff. And then the industry has taken that spirit of that music and used it to promote other cultures, or like, say like you had a person like Billie Holiday in the industry because she sang with so much expression, and then he said, well, can you sing my song? And she would sing somebody else's song and sing these different people's songs, and that became an industry, a so-called jazz industry. But it's really about the people and the connection to the people. And the reason why I'm bringing it up this way, when I have a lot of young people today, because today the music has been separated from the community, which, well, it started a while ago, but now, you know, you have to go and, you know, when I was coming up, you go to a record store, you buy the records, and, you know, and then you like the record and the person come to town, you go see them, but there's a separation between the people, the people, and it's that industry. And now we're living just by the industry, we're not living by the culture. So we just look at that industry, you know, I mean, I don't know, have any of y'all seen Beyonce live? But you know, but you probably know everything about it. When I was coming up, if there was somebody that inspired me, like maybe some of the pop culture today, I made sure I saw them. And I had to see them live. Followed them, but they were walking down the street, we followed them down the street, you know. So now it's been separated. So the younger generation who is trying to play jazz music or trying to perform jazz music, we're trying to get them back in touch to the fact that this is not a technique, it's a communication with people. So the only way that I had a group of guys and they really couldn't get it, so one day I had them pack their bags and I took them to Ghana and took them on the back road. We didn't play any music, you know, we just went on the back, we tried to survive in Ghana. And then when they got to the point where they were really weak and couldn't survive, let's get out our instruments and play. And we got our instruments out and played. But that was the closest thing to how I was raised, or how my generation was raised in the relationship to the arts, you know. And I chose to play music, but everybody who did what they had to do still coming from that creative point of view. And so I have a video. The reason why I'm saying this, because I have a video, and you have to be creative enough to understand that the creative process to making this movie. Now, the movie is a different situation. Everybody have their, likes or dislikes about the movie. For me, this video is about how they made the movie and the creative process of making this movie. Y'all know the movie Superfly? The old Superfly, not the remake. All right. Well, it's a movie that was created about the streets of Harlem. And this guy who used to sell drugs on the street, and he wanted to get out of the business. So the movie is about him getting out of the business, divorcing himself from the streets, to have I guess a different life. I don't know if it's a better life, but a different life. But this is the guy who made this movie. His name, who the creator is Gordon Parks Jr. And his father, Gordon Parks, was a famous photographer, and he started a lot of. Actually, he's the one that created that movie Shaft. So his son walking in his footsteps. For me, in the music that I play, these are the people that I had to. Everything that he said is the people that we perform for or perform with. We go into a nightclub and be all these people that come to hear this music. And the people influenced us, and we influenced people. It was for jazz music. It's a give and take. It's not, it wasn't a performance that we, it wasn't a production like that. It was all creative at the moment that we did it. And I just like to see the process of how to create whatever you want to create from ground up. First it's a vision, and then you got to bring the vision into the light. And I think it's always good not to plan it so deeply, because you got to allow the obstacles of the world to come into, and then you can change whatever you're doing to your surroundings, and that's important. Get into it. Just like in building.
For me, I liked it a lot because you can look at a production and watch it, and without kind of the behind the scenes, there's like this idea that you don't really know how they came up with it. But then watching this video, it showed such an in-depth process. And like you were talking about having a certain connection with the community, this movie is a full example of having that connection and attempting to establish that connection throughout the production.
And movies in that period, late 60s to the 70s, and still they're trying to do it. They're coming to the community and make a movie. But in those days, you use the community. Like today, like on my block, they would come they would push everybody aside and just use the street. But in those days, the people, they didn't stop the people. I remember there was a movie that was, when I was in Philly, one of those Mr. Tibbs, Sidney Poitier movies they did in our area. And we was all up in there, on the cameras and walking the streets, across the streets and all that. We was all up in the movie. I think the process today, a lot of movies are divorced from the people, and they created with maps and all of that, green screens. In those days, like he said, across the street with the pimps, and over there with the cops, and they sitting there plugging things.
Plugging cables.
Yeah, so you get to feel the whole process of creating that. And what's interesting to me, because I was a part of this, is that did you take notice to Harlem, what Harlem looked like in those days, or New York, like compared to today? I remember when I first came here, it was kind of rough, and the streets, there was all kinds of things happening on the street. But now when I look at it today, I kind of appreciate it more back then, because you was dealing with people, and it was a community, and within the community, there's always going to be some sort of challenges. Maybe crime, but it's because it's people dealing with people. We're not dealing with now you're not dealing with people, you're dealing with industries that are controlling people. But in those days, it was a community that you dealt with people. So if you walked down a certain street, everybody on that street knew everybody, so they knew who was the new person that came on that street. And they could size you up and see if you come in there with whatever intent that you come in there with, because they knew what was going on. I even knew people that can, listen to you talk and say, oh, you from such and such street, just by the way you talk. I really like that, man. For Harlem, and when I see those, I came to Harlem around that time, and I experienced, it was fun just going out in the street, getting something to eat. That Shabazz on the corner, that Shabazz used to be on, it was on Adam Clayton Powell. That was Adam Clayton Powell, Shabazz. And we go in there and they be playing John Coltrane, and the guy, that's a whole different energy there. And then you go across the street to get some shoes or something, and then they had a lot of vendors on the street in those days. So whatever you couldn't get in the stores, you got it on the street. It was like a festival every day. Every day was like a festival. You got on the street, there's always something to do. You heard things, you heard music. It was a time. Now the housing was really, I go back to my mind a lot because the apartments and everything, in those days were a little dark. Now they're nice, it's the same apartments, but they just look a little bit brighter, nicer. I don't know how that happened. But I remember coming up, we used to paint the apartment really dark, and we had the lights. Even the lights and the beads, but we would paint the apartment dark. We didn't paint our apartments white. We didn't have white. We painted dark, and then we might put like colors over the colors. It was more, the apartments were more artistic. But I mean, and they kept it. We had supers that kept the place clean. Some of the places were almost abandoned. But now, that's why I say it's an industry, because now they, I guess cleaned it up to a certain degree and shopping a whole nother sensibility that's not community. It's an interesting dynamic.
Something I also found interesting from the video was the fact that they used their own personal wardrobes for the show. And that was really interesting to know.
Yeah. I mean, if you get a chance, you might want to go and finish it. This is short, but they ran out of money, and they had to shoot that last scene. That's why the producer had to come in and be an actor so they could shoot that last scene. But it was a lot of movies in that time. I mean, it was really straight from the heart for that reason.
Can you talk a little bit about your work as a jazz musician, your selected instrumentation, and how this particular, maybe this film, the reason why you show this film in relationship to what you play and how you play?
Well, the music is a street music. When I was coming up, it's music that you learn. I wanted to play the saxophone. I got into, I was into jazz. I wanted to play the saxophone. I was a little boy. I wasn't even a teenager. And so when I went to try to get a saxophone, the teacher was like, yo, we don't teach saxophones here. That's not a legitimate instrument. You got to learn to play a clarinet. Which is, and I played the clarinet, and they didn't teach you jazz. They taught you how to play the instrument. You had to learn how, scales and etudes and all of that. And the jazz, I had to go to the streets to learn jazz. Now, all the jazz musicians played the instruments on a high level, and then they played their jazz on an even higher level because they knew that instrument so well. So it wasn't like the guys on the street that were just picking up instruments, just playing. They studied their instruments also. A lot of them, finished school like 16, 15 years old, they didn't finish their academies or university. They didn't go to the universities, then they went to the what they call academies, the School of Music, which later they come together and form a university. But they didn't finish that about 16 years old. These guys out on the street playing. So I had to go to the street to learn how to play this music correctly. And going on taking the street route, these are the people that I had to encounter, that I had to deal with, and they were my teachers too. So it wasn't always about, so when I sat down with, one of the stories, one of the stories is I had a teacher, one of my mentors named Junior Cooke. And he played, great with Hartt Silver. Hartt Silver was a piano player from the 50s. Made a lot of hits, created a lot. But Junior Cooke, he became my mentor. So when I would come to New York, I would call him up on the phone, the street phone.
Payphone.
With the payphone,
You all know what that is?
It's still here. Now, y'all might know, but if you go down to some other cities, because they still got a couple of them here. But we're calling the payphone with our dimes. And he's like, and you have to speak fast because that dime ran out. They cut you off. So, I called him, I said, Junior, he said, where you at? I said, I'm on such and such street. He said, stay right there. So I'm standing on the street and all these people. And then he would show up. He said, come on, he'd take me, he'd have his horn, and we'd go walking all over the place, we'd go to the store. And now today, I buy reeds. You buy like 10, 20 reeds at a time. Those days, you buy one reed. He'd get that one reed, 25 cents. And then he took me to this guy's house. And his apartment. We went up this place and knocked on the door. This big guy opened the door, and he had a card table. He had his little dealings on his card table. And he said, pull out your horn. And I pull out my horn. He played piano. And I played, so that was like a lesson. But I'm taking a lesson in this drug dealer's house. The drug dealer was a drummer. So, it's a lot like, I can relate to everything that's going on. Because that was the life, that was my life.
Can you talk about what brought you to Harlem in specific?
What brought me to Harlem?
Yeah.
Well, Harlem was the place to be for music, for Harlem, for jazz music. Harlem was the place to be. When you came to New York, or that's where you started. You had the clubs downtown, but the clubs downtown, didn't really have that real soulful music. I mean, they had it. When they might hire Miles Davis or somebody to play downtown, you go and see him. But in Harlem, everybody was Miles Davis. All the musicians were John Coltrane. And it was you go from club to club to club, and it was a journey. It was a learning experience, just going into the club. There was one club I played. It was called Legs and Eyes. I remember when you came down to
Was that on St. Nick? That's on St.
That
Nick?
was on Lenox, and 130, not 135, right before 134, but maybe 134. And the guy there, so I would be there playing, and I see all these great musicians going to the, and I'm playing. People I want to meet, but I'm playing. And I met Honeycombs, they would just sit at the bar, and people would talk.
Tap dancer.
And the guy, there was two guys. One guy, he told me, look, this is called Legs and Eyes because I can run fast. I got the legs, and my buddy, he got the eyes. And there's a lot of things was going on. There's a lot of drugs going through these clubs. Well, throughout, it's not just drugs. It was just, you can get anything. You can get sneakers, like incredible sneakers. It was like everybody was just, but drugs was, was the thing. But we'd go from club to club to club to club.
How many different, can you talk a little bit about the jazz clubs? Because I know they're doing this whole thing, so can you like name some of them or where they were and where you played or whatever, any of that in relationship in Harlem?
In Harlem. When I came to Harlem, there were many clubs. I can remember this. There was almost a club on every corner, or on every block. Between 125th, you go on Lenox Avenue, that was the strip. And then you have little clubs on the back sides of the street. And you would play here, you know. It was a social, life was more social there. So people needed music in their lives, you know. So you would go out and music would change it. You know, you get off of work, you go hear some music. Or you go to a movie. So you had, you had like, I remember the movie theater used to be where they built that, the Victoria. That was the movie theater when I came to town. That was the movie theater in Harlem. And you go to movies, you go to clubs, you go get something to eat. It's like just the rounds.
So as you said, there were a lot of jazz clubs along 125th Street. Now we see that
They would, on 125th Street were the stores.
Okay, so the
More
jazz
of the
clubs
clubs were on Lenox, and then you had like, there's a club, like where you saw on this show, at the Teresa Hotel across the street, there was a club, you know, on the avenues.
So I guess to broaden my question a bit more, I guess I'm just asking, so you know there's just been such a huge change. Like you said, jazz was very much more prevalent in the past. Now, like you walk down the street, I don't feel the jazz vibes anymore. So like, could you tell me a little bit about maybe that transition where you felt it kind of leaving Harlem a bit?
But it was music. It wasn't just jazz. It was music. In the clubs you had, or in the venues, you had music. You had jukebox. We had places where you can go and eat, which kind of changed too. When did the change come? I saw the biggest change came when Giuliani became mayor. The next day. Yeah, the next day. He ran all the vendors off the street. The next day he said, if anybody's out there vending, you know, they get penalty or go to jail. No more vendors. The vendors attract the people. Because I remember that on Wednesday, there'd be vendors, you can get anything. I remember a guy used to make shoes out there. You get anything. And on Wednesday, Jazzmobile would play up at Grant's Tomb. So all the vendors would close up early and then they go to Grant's Tomb. It'd be a festival. You know, you get to eat, you get clothes, you could go shopping, you get anything you want. When the vendors was chased off, most of it chased the people away. There was no more people really hanging out on the streets. I remember on Lenox Avenue, on the corner of Lenox and 125th Street, there would be people preaching on the corner.
They still do that?
Not like then.
Okay.
Then you had people that there would be like a line of people. So you gravitate to what you wanted to hear, and it was they were preaching consciousness, you know, conscious things. It wasn't just about it wasn't just church things. That's when Malcolm got it started.
Yeah.
And then they would be on a ladder preaching, and then you might hear something and you stop, and there'd be like maybe 6 guys on the street, and you stop and you listening, and then down the street would be a bookstore. I think places like when Tower Records came out, when Barnes & Noble, they killed the neighborhood bookstores, killed the neighborhood. It's like the record stores would be on 125th Street and they'd be playing the latest records out, you walk down the street and you hear, these things came and killed all of that. So people, you stop seeing people in the clubs after a while. People, stop going, hearing music, and then cable TV, You know, you can watch cartoons all day long, you know, all night long, and all these things. So it just killed the culture in that way.
Thank you.
That's why I felt, you know, it's an industry. It's not a community. For all the things that you can, you know, you order your food. Then you weren't ordering food. You went down the street, so and so cooked the chicken over here, or so and so had a good, you know, breakfast. There's places you can get breakfast, incredible breakfast. You can't get that stuff now. So, but I saw it change. That Giuliani move, bam. It happened a little bit before Giuliani, when this guy Koch, and before he left office, he was on a mission to sell as many buildings in Harlem to the industry. And I remember there would be people walking down the street, droves looking at buildings. You know. So Giuliani came into the scene and just put a stamp on that. And he killed the culture, the business in the culture.
So I have another question about like jazz music and its relationship to not necessarily like singing the song, as we know songs have words, and the relationship between jazz music altering that sensibility, like almost at the beginning, kind of complex sensibility of the drum. And I know you brought your instrument, so I would love for you to play your instrument. And I think that's true because they're really used to a lot of lectures, and you and me, you know, like we're also. Can I just stand up? Because I'm going to say this real quick. I just want to say this because I think the way that we usually communicate is in a round table discussion.
Right.
You know, we don't really. I've learned to do it because I'm a part of the institution, so I've learned to talk to people. But the thing that I noticed, you know, particularly with Antoine and also with other like real musicians who are not in the institution, to talk at the people is one thing. That's not really what they do. It's all really kind of collective interplay, and it's usually done in a way that, you know, is beyond notions of words in that way. It also is done with words. But I wanted you to play because there's this conversation about the music nowadays and its relationship to jazz music as a lineage. But there are lots of things like unspoken, right? Particularly, I think, when young people listen to jazz, I hear a lot of young people say, well, I don't really understand it. It's like
Kind of like singing about your hardships. Kind of.
Well, that's not hardships. It's expressing yourself. And the industry push it from the point of view of you know, coming from a hard place, singing, get out. That's not true, but it's an expression. An expression again with call and response. Big, it's call and response. But the music we have used the music to help take us out of the depressed situation, but we also used it when we were happy too. So it wasn't, and the reason why I'm getting at the blues, because there's an ingredient with the blues that is the call and response is first, and then the words come second. From my part. So, you know, I used to listen to my grandfather's poem, and I thought it was spiritual, you know, whatever, but it was blues, you know. And from the church point of view, it's becoming spiritual, but then from going to nightclub, it's the same thing, you know. And, you know, I understood the words, even though he was humming. I don't remember him saying any words, but I knew what it was. And so we took that expression and we put it over. So say, you know, they got these Broadway shows, right? And, you know, it sounds funny, but they want to make that song a little more expressive, and then they get somebody like a Billie Holiday, just put that expression to it, and then people get down and listen to it and say, oh, I feel that. sell it. I think now we are pulled away from using the music as a technique. It's not an expression. So if I play something for you, I'm going to play expression. I'm not going to play it as a technique. So if you had, just say, just a little thing like I'm going to the store, you know. You can hear. Now you get it? I'm telling you something, right? Now you can try to figure out, you know, it's in your mind, everybody has their own minds, so I'm going to tell them what they hear in their own mind. But I'm telling you, we're going to the store. And I'm giving you a whole story about going to the store, right? So you can follow me. Y'all follow, did I lose you? Did you
Yeah.
understand what I was what was the expression? Can you tell me the expression was?
There's like there's a kind of, you know, oh, we're going somewhere, there's an optimism maybe, but a little bit of mystery.
Yeah, but it was based off of da-da-da-da-da, right? Did y'all hear that?
Yes.
Every time I play da-da-da-da-da,
Yeah.
da-da-da-da-da, so you can follow that. That's the expression. That's what you do. That kind of stuff. So once you understood that, so a lot of people were, in those times, had the same understanding about music or about art. So when they heard these things, they knew what they were listening to. But now, it's pulled away from it. So, you know, so I can go across the street and go, da-da-da-da, nobody will know. But y'all know, right? So this is the community, I know. And that's what the power of the music. I don't have to tell you. And government things, they knew that because the guy, one of the great jazz musicians named Charlie Parker, they had this music that they called bebop. They called it bebop. He didn't call it. That's what the industry called it. And he would play fast, but then he would play these songs that people knew. And in the middle, in those songs, the government saying, well, he's saying something to the people. We got to figure out what he's saying to people. And then he was talking to the people, and people knew. You know, so like it was the story where he would play something, and his manager would come, and he would play a line and tell his manager to go and check the money. The manager come back and give him thumbs up, and he keep on playing. Then he cut the band off. You know? So it got to a point where all his songs, he had these names for these songs, and there's one song he wrote called "Now Is the Time," and the government got really scared about that because they thought he was telling the people in the community, "Now is the time." You can just look it up, you know, because the show used to come on called Joe Noble Show. He did a whole extensive thing where he got to file. But yeah, you know, these are expressions that we had as a community. As a community good. It wasn't just a black community. And that's.
Let me see.
We have a few more minutes for the whole class.
But you know what, can you play something that they can understand, so you can like have that tie, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think you know what I
don't
mean?
know
Or like,
now I just gave you that little phrase. And I can play and follow me on that phrase. That's the kind of musician I am. I I'm not the kind.
Can I create a story and then you play a song based off the story?
You can try that.
Alright, let's see. Okay, you guys we'll all start it. So it's a nice day, right? It starts off with a nice day, and then you go for a swim. Then you go for a swim, but then you start drowning. Oh, wait. But then the savior of the lifeguard comes and saves you. And then you sit, and then you just eat some ice cream, and you think about how adventurous day was.
Do something for me.
I'll tell you what. See what you just did? That's your story. You created that story. I can't create your story. I create my story. But you know what? Why don't you come up here? You tell a story, and I'll play behind you.
Okay. I'm headed to the pool. You know, it's nice and sunny outside.
This is where I'm not working. Let me set you up.
Yes. Okay.
I'll set you up. I'm giving you an introduction, so you gotta know. You gotta let me do the
All
introduction.
right. I'm gonna feed off you.
What the story is about?
It's a beautiful day. It's sunny. You want to go to the pool. I'm gonna hit this dive. I'm saved. They're saving me. Now I'm gonna just do this ice cream. The end of the story.
Not bad. Not bad. As we work more together, and then you really get into what I'm doing, then you can let me do something, and then it can guide you to, because you might not want to go where you went. I might play something, and you might do something else. Your story have to balance out.
So your participation with what you did is really interesting because that's how we work. But it is a practice, right? In the beginning, it really isn't necessarily like we're constantly practicing with being together, right? So that my story doesn't so I'm not overthinking my story, but I'm also thinking about what I'd like to say, but also hearing simultaneously. And that's when you go to listen to jazz bands, right, or jazz quartets or quintets or trios or whatever, you're listening to them listening to each other, right, and telling the story. And so it requires you to also listen as opposed to just play along all the time. I think when I went to that Beyonce concert, it was a last minute kind of thing, and I went, and Beyonce, I'm not a beehive, but I'm a performer, right? So I respect performing. But the thing that I noticed is that everybody, of course, knew what? All the songs. Like, people were singing the songs, and just in respect of, whatever she had recorded. And anything that she sung new, people were a little sensitive about it. They didn't really understand it so much. And that's where the improv comes from. When you don't necessarily know all the words, then you start to incorporate your own feelings about this new kind of thing that you're experiencing, not from a recording point of view. So you and Antoine up there together was, even though it's funny, it was also really important because it is an opportunity to partner. And that's where you all are right now in your partnerships building. and listening to each other in this way, in this very improvisatory way, right? So I just wanted to comment that that was,
It's a community agreement.
and it's a community agreement, and you were moving. So you weren't just standing there telling a story, all of a sudden you became the mover, right? Which was really interesting. I've never seen you do that before. Not that you never did.
I'm a lifeguard, I'm
But-
a training lifeguard.
And I'm a lifeguard, so
See, if I knew that, then I would have.
that would have been another story.
I would have understood the story from your point of view, you know. That's interesting. Well, all of this is, because I mean, you're young and you're in school, you know. I think if you communicate with yourself, with each other, because y'all, I mean, how many classes, how many days a week are y'all here together?
Every day,
Lot of
all the
days.
time. It's just this
All the
one
days.
course that.
So
We are together twice a week.
twice a year. Okay. So if you can treat this class like what we just did, it would be a different impact on your mind and your life and your learning in this
And
situation.
your practice.
Then you got questions to ask. You got questions to ask whoever comes, and you got questions for yourself. Well, you know, try to get through, and then then you could use the instructors to the highest level, because it would force them to go outside of their, to give you their experiences. And that's what you really need, is their experiences, understanding the experiences. When I was in school, my teacher, his name was Jackie McLean, one of the great jazz alto saxophone players. He would sit down and he would tell us all these stories. He would tell me a lot of stories. He called them bebop fables. And they were great stories, but stories that made sense to me because I left school when I was on the road. When I was on the road, I started running into these situations. And it helped me. That helped me totally to survive on the road. Not the little notes he was telling me to play and all of that, because that was my choice. But the understanding experiences, so y'all together, communicate with each other and communicate.
Where are you playing next? Tony?
Where am I playing next? I don't even
You should give them
this,
so that they can see.
yeah, I had to post some, because the way my life is, every day I'm home. So I do have performances coming up. My next performance is not in town. My next performance is in town. I think it's in June. But I gotta put that stuff up. But I'm playing every day, to tell you, you probably, if y'all walk down to St. Nicholas, any of y'all walk down St. Nicholas Terrace? Yeah, do you ever hear like saxophone? All the time?
I was doing that one night.
Yeah.
One night, every night.
I think I heard it on Zoom.
I'm always playing. So I pick up the horn. I'm always searching, trying to play. So I just take that to the club.
Well, thank you, Tony. What an honor to be welcomed into your community and now our community that we're building together. So thank you so much.